walked into the north of Britain. They did not come back. Not 500, not a cohort. 5,000 men. The full strength of Legio IX Hispana, the 9th Legion. One of Rome's most experienced military units. Veterans of Julius Caesar's Gallic campaigns, of the civil wars, of the conquest of Britain itself. Men who had been fighting Rome's battles for generations, under a standard that had earned its reputation across a dozen campaigns in a dozen provinces. They marched north, somewhere around 108 AD, into the territory beyond the frontier, into the land that Rome had been trying and failing to subdue for decades, into the specific geography of northern Britain, where the hills were wrong for Roman tactics, and the people were wrong for Roman administration, and the weather was wrong for Italian soldiers, who had not fully made their peace with what Britain did to men in winter. And then the record ends. Not a battle record, not a casualty list, not even an administrative document officially disbanding the unit. Just the last confirmed evidence of the 9th Legion at Iberacum, the fort at York, around 108 AD. And then, nothing. No mention in any subsequent campaign record, no transfer orders, no discharge documents for its veterans, no Eagle Standard recorded as captured or lost. 5,000 men. Gone. And Rome never officially explained what happened to them. Before this video is done, you are going to understand what it felt like to be inside that legion. Not the mystery of what happened to them from the outside, but the experience of being one of the 5,000 men who marched into the north. What they had already been through, what the north of Britain had already done to the 9th Legion before the last march began, and why Rome's silence about their disappearance might be the most revealing thing about it. The 9th Legion had a history with Britain specifically. They had been part of the original invasion force in 43 AD under Claudius. They had fought in the campaigns that brought the south of the island under Roman control and then pushed north. They had suffered, specifically and documented, at the hands of Boudica in 61 AD, when the Iceni queen led a rebellion that destroyed Caledonia and turned on the Roman column marching to relieve it. The 9th marched toward Boudica's army. The sources record the outcome with a bluntness that suggests the writers understood that what they were describing was catastrophic. The 9th was ambushed. Approximately 2,000 legionaries were killed. The survivors, a fraction of the full legion, escaped and fell back, recovered, were reinforced, kept functioning as a unit. The 9th had been devastated in Britain and had kept marching. By 82 AD, they were in Caledonia, modern Scotland, with Agricola's campaign pushing the frontier north. Tacitus recorded an incident that the 9th would not have forgotten. The Caledonian army, having obtained intelligence on the Roman dispositions, attacked the 9th's marching camp at night. Through their fortifications and the arrival of Agricola's cavalry at dawn, the attack was repelled. But the 9th had been almost overwhelmed in its camp, in the dark, by an enemy that had found them and chosen them specifically. The weakest of the 3 Roman legions in the campaign. Almost overwhelmed. Twice in their British career, at Caledonia and at the camp in Caledonia, the 9th Legion had experienced the specific thing that Roman military training worked hardest to prevent. The moment when the formation broke or came close to breaking. The moment when the enemy had found the gap. They were still a functioning legion in 108 AD, 26 years after the camp attack. Whatever the experience had done to the men who had lived through it, the institution had absorbed it and continued. And then they marched north. The north of Britain in the early 2nd century AD was not pacified. This is perhaps obvious, but it is important. Roman Britain existed, functionally, south of a line that various emperors had tried at various points to push further north, and had eventually concluded could not be pushed further north, without costs that exceeded the value of what was north of it. Hadrian would build his wall in the 120s, partly, historians argue, in response to whatever happened to the 9th Legion, as a recognition that the line had been found and needed to be marked. But in 108 AD, the wall did not yet exist. The frontier was less defined. The territory north of Iberacum was contested ground, not Roman, not entirely beyond Roman influence, but the kind of landscape where Roman military presence was an assertion rather than a certainty. Into this, the 9th marched. 5,000 men moving through territory where the hills provided cover for exactly the kind of warfare that Caledonian warriors had demonstrated they understood and Romans in Britain had learned to fear. Not the open field battle where Roman formation and discipline and the mathematical relationship between a shield wall and a charging mass of individual warriors produced predictable results. The ambush in the hills, the attack on the marching column, the specific, grinding, attritional warfare of people who knew the ground and were willing to wait as long as necessary for the moment when the ground could be used against the people who didn't know it. The 9th Legion had experienced this before. They had the institutional memory of Camalodunum and the camp at night. They were not inexperienced men marching into an unknown situation. They were experienced men marching into a known situation. And experience had taught them that known situations could still end badly in the north of Britain. There are 5 theories about what happened to them. None can be confirmed. The most dramatic, the one that captured the popular imagination through a novel in 1954 and a film in 2011, is the simplest. The 9th Legion marched into Caledonia and was destroyed, ambushed in the hills or the forest or the specific terrain that the Caledonians had spent generations learning to use against anyone who tried to impose order on it. 5,000 men killed in the kind of engagement that left no formal battlefield, no victory monument, no Roman record because there were no Romans left to make the record. The counter-argument is that if 5,000 Roman soldiers had been annihilated in a single engagement, Rome would have recorded it. The loss of Varus and 3 legions in the Teutoburg forest in 9 AD was recorded, was in fact so significant that Augustus is said to have walked the halls of his palace crying the name of Varus, demanding his legions back. A loss of that scale left traces. The 9th's disappearance left almost none, which leads to the second theory: transfer. The 9th was not destroyed in Britain, but moved to the eastern frontier, to Judea during the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 to 135 AD, to Armenia during the Parthian Wars. Reassigned, absorbed into different command structures, eventually disbanded quietly in the way that Roman military administration sometimes disbanded units without ceremony when the strategic situation no longer required them. The problem with transfer is the same as the problem with annihilation: the absence of record. A transfer of 5,000 men to the eastern frontier would have produced paperwork. The eastern frontier campaigns produced records. The 9th appears in none of them. The third theory is quieter, and in some ways more disturbing. The 9th was not destroyed dramatically or transferred officially. It simply drained away. Detachments sent here and there, never fully reconstituted. Soldiers dying of disease, of the accumulated damage of decades of frontier service in the worst climate Rome's empire had to offer. Not being replaced, because the supply of trained men was being directed elsewhere. The Legion becoming, over years, a ghost of its official strength. Still officially existing, still on the rolls, but functionally no longer a functioning unit. Until it wasn't even that. The absence from Marcus Aurelius's columns, where every other legion was listed and the 9th was not, points to sometime before 165 AD as the end. After that, definitively, the 9th was gone. Before that, and increasingly after 108, it was absent from the record in a way that the other legions of Britain were not. Here is what the uncertainty actually tells you about Rome. A legion of 5,000 men, men who had sworn the sacramentum, who had served for years or decades, who had families and histories, and the specific accumulated identity of a military unit that had fought under its eagle since the time of Julius Caesar, disappeared, and the official record of the Roman Empire does not tell us how. Not because Rome couldn't maintain records. The Roman administrative machine was one of the most sophisticated record-keeping operations the ancient world produced. Not because the loss was small enough to ignore. 5,000 soldiers was a significant military asset, but because the information that would explain the 9th's disappearance was information that reflected badly on something or someone, on a campaign that had gone wrong, on a tactical decision that had produced catastrophic results, on a command failure, on the specific limitations of Roman power in the north of Britain that Rome would prefer to acknowledge obliquely rather than directly. The wall that Hadrian built in the 120s is the most honest statement Rome ever made about the 9th Legion. Not words, a wall. A physical line on the landscape that said, "Here is as far as we go. North of this is not ours." What happened north of this, to the 5,000 men who marched into it and didn't march back, stays north of this. The wall kept the north out. It also, perhaps, kept the explanation in. If this is the Rome you come back for, not the official history on the monuments, but the truth of what happened in the places the monuments don't record, hit that like button and subscribe to Legacy of Rome. Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. Every week, we go back into what it really cost to wear Roman armor. Subscribe, and we'll keep making it.